There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're starting in a few weeks. August 28, 29.
Wow. Go time. Are you ready?
I'm all set.
Okay, go ahead and tell me your name and the name of your program.
First, my name is Omar Nunez. I'm originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, and I'm the AD for the Mexico program, the theme of which this fall is migration, transnational borders, transnational communities.
Just try that one more time. Migration, borders, and transnational
Borders.
communities. So start.
Migration, borders, and transnational communities. That's
Okay.
correct.
So, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Omar Nunez. I'm from Oaxaca, Mexico, and we're running the program in the fall, migration, borders, and transnational communities.
And tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me a little bit of an idea of your own background and what brings you to this program.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm originally from Oaxaca. I've been working in international education for over 12 years. I started an organization called Olintlatwali. Olintlatwali was first created with the intention to create educational programs framed by a more critical understanding of what it is that's actually happening in Oaxaca, Mexico in relation to language, identity, indigenous perspectives, indigenous knowledge. And using that foundation, we would bring students to Mexico from different places, mainly Canada and the United States, to have a better understanding of what it is to be an outsider in a very complex place like Mexico, and Oaxaca in particular. Oaxaca is a place where we have 570 municipalities. We have up to 14 indigenous languages. We have 8 different regions. And it's a place that has an interesting history of colonization. So it is about how the Spanish mixes with the indigenous, and indigenousness was in itself complex. So anyway, so that displays in the food, in the art, in the languages, and the way people communicate. And as a result of that work, I became more and more engaged in understanding what is it that was happening in the indigenous community. So we do art and literacy programs, for example. And in that work, I became close to understanding what it is that is happening with the families, with the children, when they migrate or when they come back to Mexico. So anyways, that's a little bit of how I started my work around international education in the context of Oaxaca, thinking of our students as individuals who need to see and understand what is happening from a more critical perspective.
So when you say our students, you mean the students that come from Canada and North
Exactly.
America?
Most of our students.
Hold on.
Most of our students.
Wait, this one's
Hold
like
on 1 second. Sorry, something just.
beep at you.
There we go. Hold on. Let me pause it. There we go.
Okay, great.
I'm good.
Right. So yeah, most of our students, even though we also work with Mexican students and Oaxacan students, we provide free language classes, we provide art workshops. Our students, international students, come for an average period of time of 4 weeks, but now with SAT, for example, we have a much longer period of time. And that's what we offer. We offer language classes, we offer seminars on Mexican history, on street art. We would bring into the communities to spend time with the families, to learn about local values, local knowledge. So it's part of the big experience that they come in.
And why is it important, do you feel like, for Canadian and North American students to have that experience of what it feels like to be, I guess, an outsider in a specific place?
Well, first of all, most of the students who come already show an interest in learning about different cultures. So that's the first window that opens to a different type of learning. It is important because we are, Mexico and the United States, for example, we're close neighbors. We have a historical relationship that, yes, involves the cultural aspect, the linguistic aspect, but there's also lots of gaps as to what it is that is happening locally, politically, socially, and when the students come, they come to fill those gaps that are so important for them, especially in a country where we have a great majority now of Spanish-speaking population. Chicago, for example, is the city with the largest number of Mexicans after Mexico City. We talk about Mexico City, over 24 million people. The second city in the world with the largest community of Mexicans is Chicago.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So Hispanic population is growing tremendously, and
More than
LA is the second in the United States
LA? After Chicago?
after Chicago,
Oh.
and then we have New York.
Mm.
Los Angeles, LA is a very interesting example in relation to Oaxaca. It's called Oaxaca, California. We have full areas, full neighborhoods in Los Angeles that are, mostly Oaxaqueños. And you can easily identify the connection between Los Angeles and Oaxaca per region. So in the Sierra Norte, you have a connection, a very strong connection with certain parts of Los Angeles in which they have radio stations, they have Guelaguetzas festivals, which is a traditional folk arts festival that happens every year in Oaxaca. So going back to, the connection is there, the links are there, and yet I think for the students to understand, to fully understand what it is that, where is it that they're coming from, where are their parents coming from, why did they have to migrate, that's a very important aspect of that. Many times, because the stories are difficult to share, the parents don't necessarily bring those stories to the table, and you have new generations of children who are born in the United States, whose parents are from Mexico, but who don't fully understand what is it that motivated their parents to migrate. And yes, many times, or most of the times, it's economic reasons, but there are many other factors that push that migration to happen. And one of them is just family reunification, as one example. So the students come and then they experience being in a community. They understand that cooking, for example, is one of the most important components of family. That the time that we spend with the families cooking, talking about the community, talking about the family, really, really creates a solid basis for their own identity. And they become to better understand why their parents will always, for example, spend or emphasize so much on you have to be home, you have to eat with us, you have to be part of this process. In terms of understanding social practices or understanding politics in Mexico, again, we have in Oaxaca communities that are mostly autonomous. We have communities who, yes, are recognized by our government, but that really have a lot of autonomy over the land, over the food they produce, and about the governance systems that they have. So for the students to see a community working together in favor of the community without necessarily the support coming from the federal government or the state government, it's eye-opening.
Is that because there were resistance movements or autonomous movements for autonomy or movements among the indigenous community to create those areas?
I think that's a good question. The notion of, for example, latifundios, which is basically ejido land, which is the land that it belongs to indigenous people, was there before the Spanish came, right? So it was indigenous land, they have the autonomy over the land. When the Spanish come, there was a slavery in Mexico. So what they do is they took over the land and they put in charge of this land certain people within the communities, okay, who now have to administer the land, but basically will use the indigenous labor with no payment involved. After the independence movement, that changes and the land remains in the hands of the indigenous people, but now everyone is involved in working the land and working in favor of the community. So it is a system that has pre-Columbian foundations that is broken when the Spanish come, and then it goes back through the independence movement. And also you have communities in Oaxaca where the Spanish hardly ever made it to. So we have communities far up in the mountains where the influence of the Spanish is very, very little. It's something that has come through years of interaction with other communities nearby.
And they still speak the indigenous languages?
They still speak the
Spanish.
indigenous language. They may have maybe an elementary school that is bilingual, that brings the indigenous language and the Spanish language. So it's very interesting, the whole notion of autonomy, but most importantly, how communities have learned to help and support each other. And that's something that the students can see. So the whole notion of community is very important.
And so the students that are coming to your center and coming to your programs are primarily of Latino heritage that are sort of refinding their roots, or are you drawing other people as well? Because it would seem like in the current North American political climate and Canadian, this, I mean, the community spirit and the whole, what drives migration is applicable to many different disciplines.
That population has increased in the last, I would say, 5 years.
The students that are non-Latino?
The students that are Latinos.
That are?
That are. It's, in the past, it's been mostly students who come from a different background, and mostly Anglo students. But in the last 5-6 years, the number of students with heritage, for example, heritage speakers, Spanish, is increasing. There is a tremendous community of students who have been in the United States, who were born in Mexico, who have DACA, the Fair Action for Childhood Arrivals, who unfortunately cannot travel. But if it wasn't because of that restriction, I think we'll have probably 80%, if not more, students who want to reconnect with their roots. But yeah, the populations are certainly changing in that respect. We do have more heritage students.
What brought you, from a personal angle, what brought you to want to do this kind of work?
I think, well, my father was indigenous. I think I always had a call for education, to be a teacher. I taught at the elementary level for many years. I taught secondary, I took university school. And what really brought me to do the work in the communities, I think, it was that my own quest to find my own identity and to be in good terms with my own identity. You know, when you are from Mexico, you have indigenous blood. But the indigenous blood is seen as something negative. You know, the stigma of being indigenous. So if you're indigenous, you're less intelligent, you're less capable, you don't speak Spanish, you speak dialects. You're certainly part of a population that continues to be discriminated. My father was discriminated. My father grew up, and this is something I found out later in my own life. My father never really shared his own story as the one kid in the family that made it to university. But he went through a lot of discrimination among the mestizo population in Oaxaca. As an adult, we began to share stories, and I began to better understand why, for example, he was working in Oaxaca as a lawyer to bring the indigenous land back to the people. So that was something really interesting, because I remember as a child traveling with him to different communities and just being welcomed in the most wonderful way. People are, of course, warm. They're thankful for the work that my father was doing in terms of helping them. He never charged a penny. He would get paid with ducks and deers and turtles. So I think for me, having those memories as a child really led to having a stronger connection with the people in the communities. And I never felt necessarily as comfortable in the more urban setting. But not only that, I was always taken aback by the way a lot of the people would deny their own identity. Because if you're in Oaxaca, not only in Mexico, but if you're in Oaxaca, you certainly have indigenous blood. But there's the history of colonization, the impact of colonization in our minds and in our hearts is still present to the point where people, yes, welcome the indigenous as a celebration. It's this romantic idea of the indigenous and the folk art instead of art, or the handicrafts instead of the art, or so the discourse in itself tells you a lot about how people still see themselves attached from the indigenous people. So for me, going back to understanding my own place, my own identity as an indigenous person in Oaxaca was definitely a key factor. And as an educator, I began to become more and more involved in this whole notion of critical education or decolonizing methodologies. So as an academic, when you talk about the word research in the context of indigenous people, it's something you have to be extremely careful, because it's certainly a West, understanding of knowledge. Most recently, we had I organized through Olitlatwali, which is the organization I started in Oaxaca, the first international assembly for community development across borders. And what we did was to bring people, mostly from Oaxaca and from the indigenous communities, to share their knowledge with those who came from the outside. So we have people from the United States and Canada, University of Washington, University of Simon Fraser. We have filmmakers. We had people who work indirectly with organizations in Mexico to come and directly learn from our people, from our indigenous people, about what is it they're doing in terms of community development, what is it that they're doing to protect their forests, what is it they're doing to protect their water, what is the governance systems that they have and that it's been working for 500 years and more after the arrival of the Spanish. So it was an amazing opportunity to honor not only an indigenous community, because this takes place in an indigenous community, but also to honor the knowledge of our people. And to me, that's what we can also do as educators, is to create spaces for that knowledge to actually generate ideas and to open possibilities for mutual work to create international communities, because in the end I think that's what we need. We need communities to be aware of what are our challenges, as well as we need to understand what are the challenges here, and they're very similar. But if we can work together, then maybe it will be easy to come up with ideas as to how to approach that. So this assembly was fully bilingual and also included indigenous languages to the extent that was possible and it was necessary for those who were there. So we had Zapotec, we had Mixteco, we had English, and we had Spanish. So it was a wonderful multilingual experience.
Now, were there members of indigenous communities in North America that came to the conference?
We had people representing, for example, people on the west, the groups on the west of the United States, the Suquamish. We have representatives of the Dakota land, who are basically talking about what's happening with the fracking. We have a filmmaker who was talking precisely about that. So it was a really neat and wonderful experience.
So when you talk about international communities, you're saying not necessarily people from the same indigenous group, but people that are sharing the same struggles and learning
across borders, across
the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we do. We started with what you would call small projects in different communities. We became more involved in bringing youth from one community to another. We became involved directly with people who needed support as to how to improve, for example, the way they work with art and how to market their products, to avoid the middle person, and to what we just did in migration. Again, it's always been there. Children who, another example of what we do is we have a great population of children who are born in the United States but whose parents are Mexicans. They may be undocumented, many of the times they're undocumented. And then what happens when the parents either are deported or they're threatened to be deported, or they have to come back to Mexico because their mom is dying, or because they're called by the community to fulfill a particular cargo, what it's called, or a function in the community. And the children come for the first time sometimes to a community where that doesn't look at all to the place where they're used to. So we may have a kid from urban LA who comes to an indigenous community with a population of 800 people who now has to be in school.
Who may or may not speak the indigenous language.
Doesn't speak the indigenous language, speaks some Spanish and English, right? But English is often spoken at home in the United States. So what they have is English that is learned at school. And it's for the kids to grow up with two languages, I think is wonderful. But it takes time for them to fully get to this place where they can be considered fully bilingual. But in that process, they're considered not proficient in either language. So in the United States, they speak broken English. In Mexico, they speak broken Spanish. So imagine how difficult that is for their own identity. So they come to Mexico, and instead of being in 5th grade, they're placed in 4th grade because they don't know anything about Mexican history. So we started a project, documented the lives of the children, the transnational children. And basically what we learned is that what we probably knew from the beginning, that these children need to be empowered, need to be supported, need special materials at school, need to be considered in this educational system where there's nothing in the curriculum that is curriculum for them. And this is a reality. We have thousands.
And are you seeing an increase in the number of children in that as more people are deported from the United States? Have you already seen an increase?
I would say the height of that was somewhere during the probably last years of the Obama administration, where it was really, really high. Yeah.
They called him deporter in chief.
Exactly. And exactly. Now it's going down a little bit. But yet now we have kids who have been in the indigenous communities for 5-6 years, or as I found out through this, I basically followed the lives of children for 10 years. And what I found out is that children, when they come, they go through depression. Families don't have enough money to send their kids back. These are kids who have a visa, who have a passport, who are born in the United States, so they don't need a visa. So they can go back if they want, but the parents are many times undocumented, so they cannot really risk themselves in going back. So what they would do, sometimes the pattern would be going, they would move to Tijuana. The kids will go to school across the border and come back every day. That was one pattern. The other pattern is that they send the children back to the United States with a family member. They go to school there for maybe a year or two, but then they go through the same depression because they're away from the parents, so they come back. So it's a constant back and forth, which is really complex. Again, what does that do to the children? It's a sense of isolation, very complex in terms of grounding themselves. Academically, it affects them. So anyways, that's a lot of that's another story of migration that we often don't see.
And it has long-term implications for society.
Absolutely.
Especially in the smaller communities.
Absolutely. And in the case of Oaxaca, LA is a perfect example. So the stories of these children continue. And And now you have maybe the parents were able to make it back into the United States and document it because they want to ensure education or what they conceive as a better future for the children. Again, the complexity is there. So that's just part of what I think students could come to Oaxaca can see, not only because they're going to be in a state that has lots of migration going into the United States and Canada, but they're going to see part of the work that has been done in terms of transnational children, in terms of identity, in terms of local knowledge, and that in itself, I think really allows them to better understand what it is that is happening in the so-called global south.
Right. It's probably too early to sort of discern trends since the Trump administration took office, but it would seem like there would be certainly some patterns that would emerge from people who are either going back and forth or living here, who feel just like, I mean, this administration has clearly made them feel unwanted.
Yeah.
And that rhetoric has risen in the United States. So they're in a country where they hold a passport and yet they feel like, where do I belong?
Yeah, I think what's happened with this administration, the money, the remittances coming, for example, which is very interesting, from the United States to Mexico, it's always been really high, millions of dollars. Trump is bringing, what has happened is a lot of the Mexicans who are documented, who have been there for years, are now afraid that maybe their permanent resident status may become not a good status anymore, for example. So a lot of money was coming back to Mexico. Complete families are coming back to Mexico, basically because they're afraid of, not only the legal piece, but also the way society are. It's becoming almost a fad to hate Latinos, to see them as not even human beings. The criminalization of our people, the dehumanization of who they are is just horrible. So that is happening. Another thing that is happening, which is very interesting in the case of Mexico, because Mexico is a country of origin. We have where migrants originate, but also transit. But now a destination for Central America. So we have, people fleeing violence from Honduras, Salvador, Guatemala, now Nicaragua with the complex phenomenon of the government and what's happened. So now what's happening is that Central Americans are considering and seeing Mexico as a place to stay. So we have an increased number of migrants in Chiapas, in Oaxaca, in Guerrero. You see them wandering the streets. Shelters are at this maximum capacity. They're looking for jobs in Mexico. They're trying to get asylum. And they know that the opportunities for them to make it across the border in the United States are even more difficult now. Or if they make it, they're going to be deported right away. You see streamlining in what's happening in Tucson, what's happening in San Diego. Massive deportation, right? They have to sign up, say, yes, I declare that I want to go back home. Well, what happens if they go back home? They're going to be at risk. There's Honduras is one of the most violent places in the world right now. We have people who's being murdered every 7 minutes. And the gang violence is horrible. So that is also creating different patterns, not only of migration, but the new communities of Central Americas inside of Mexico. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We only hope that our Mexican government is certainly, empathetic and congruent with the discourse that we've always talked about when it comes to how our migrants are treated in the United States. So we'll see. But truly a fascinating place to be in Mexico right now, to learn about what's...
Yeah, it's small, but Very good.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of great restaurants over there.
So we'll talk a little bit about Oaxaca then.
Yeah, we're talking about the program, so once the students
Yeah.
leave Mexico City, then based in Oaxaca, and then maybe
Okay.
talk about, great, so what will they do in Oaxaca, and then
Mhm.
maybe what they can look forward to in terms of research.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So yeah, we spent a few days in Mexico City, and then we drive to Oaxaca, which is where the program basically is based. In Oaxaca, of course, we're gonna have, that's the place where we have all the academic pieces coming together in terms of the seminars and in terms of the lectures, the classes that are gonna be taken, political economy, of migration and transnational communities. This is also the place where the students will have the opportunity to work on their internships and of course their research project. So in terms of, Oaxaca is a place where with a very active community in terms of grassroots movements and also projects that are community based. And that means we have a good group of NGOs that are doing really important work, and that's where we are hoping the students can be placed and do their internships. So for example, very relevant to the work of, to what's happening around migration, we have an organization called Caminos. Caminos, what they've been doing for several years, they're helping Oaxacan families whose migrants are lost. And they got lost in their journey to the United States. So what they do is that they help families reconnect with their family members to find them. They go to different communities. They do a whole profile of those who are missing. They contact organizations in the border. They contact detention centers in the United States. So there's basically a puzzle that comes together. You know, many of the migrants have been missing for years. Many of them might have a difficult time in the desert and maybe passed away there. So they work with an Argentinian organization doing DNA analysis. It's fascinating the work they do. They really do a whole research process to find women, men, and children sometimes. Not only that, but they provide also social and emotional support to those who are on this side and who haven't heard from their family members for years. And that's one organization that we have been working with for several years now. There's other organizations doing, of course, amazing work around arts, for example, using art as a way to speak for those who maybe don't have a voice. So we're talking about stencil, we're talking about murals, we're talking about, there's a wonderful collective called Locos, and they're working in an indigenous community. Their most recent work is right now in the Central Public Library of Los Angeles, and it's an amazing display of this hybridity in terms of identity between the Oaxaqueño and the LA. So it's the Oaxaca, California identity. Our students will have the opportunity to meet them, to hear about the work they do, to see their work. And a wonderful opportunity to also to do research as to how art can be used to also speak of what it is to be a migrant in Mexico, in Oaxaca, and in between. So those are just two examples of the organizations we'll be working with in Oaxaca. And in terms of research, I mean, vast. The students will have the opportunity to do ethnographic work in indigenous communities. They will have the opportunity to know, to have a close relationship with those who are doing sustainable projects. I mean, the possibilities are really vast.
And do students need to speak Spanish? Is there a Spanish prerequisite for the program?
Yeah, there's a 3-semester prerequisite of Spanish, meaning the Spanish is probably somewhere within advanced, beginner, and intermediate. once we're in Oaxaca, the Spanish classes are definitely a big piece of the program, and they will be immersed in the Spanish. So in my experience, by the third, fourth week of the program, the students feel much more confident in their Spanish skills, in the comprehension, production, which means that by the time they have to become more involved in the internships and the research, then it's definitely, I don't see how students cannot really feel comfortable using Spanish. So yes, it's full immersion, and the Spanish will help them.
And they'll be in homestays as well, right?
They'll also be in
So they'll be
homestays,
speaking
which
maybe indigenous, maybe Spanish.
probably mostly Spanish because we're in the city of Oaxaca, right? They will have the opportunity to interact with families and children and students in the communities where we visit, but for the most part they're going to be in the city of Oaxaca, which is where we're based. It's a fairly small city, but I mean, we're talking about a little less than 1 million of a population, and the students, I think one of the very nice opportunities that Oaxaca offers is that we all going to be in a community where we don't have to be moving constantly a lot in order to have to be able to share what is it that is happening in one organization, what is happening with one research project. So we'll be close enough to share that, which I think is important.
Right, because the reflective practice is part of an
Exactly.
SIT experience.
Exactly.
As is reciprocity, what can they expect to be able to contribute while they're there?
Yeah, that's always one of the challenges. I think the reciprocity, the way I see it, is that we get closer to a more balanced reciprocity the moment we create a community of students that can actually see how reciprocity is so unreachable most of the time. But if we get closer to the mindset where we see reciprocity as a possibility, that only happens when we come with a mindset that is not judgmental, that is not always critical of what looks as different, but we bring the mindset where we together create opportunities for a more balanced contribution or for more balanced work. I think that's where reciprocity begins to happen. It's really a mindset, and it's really, when you have that mindset, the students begin to, for example, just be more humble in terms of trying to understand what it is that is happening, and it creates more sincere dialogue with those who are from the communities. It brings a more honest relationship. So I think that's the reciprocity at the level that maybe almost a bit abstract as a thing. And in concrete ways, I think reciprocity, and the way I think the students will also experience that is, it begins with that and then continues along the process. So we're planting seeds for a more reciprocal relationship, but not just during the internship or not just during that time. What the students bring with them, what the students learn, is what makes the relationships between the countries reciprocal, because they're going to get to places where they're going to have the opportunity to actually have some impact in decision making. Maybe if they become or come to places where they can contribute to the local immigrant community in Chicago, that's where the reciprocity also begins to flourish. So I see that as a seed, but we need solid foundations for that to happen. And in the end, I think in international education, in those programs, reciprocity is always a little bit of balance, but it becomes balanced if we provide a context where the students really see that what needs to happen. It's a clear and honest understanding of this of the unbalance. So that's how we see reciprocity.
That's great. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very, and I suppose then ultimately reciprocity would be if they come back and help to pass some kind of